Hmm. Yep. I think that there's also a distinction, kind of like you mentioned, between something that's modern and something that's postmodern or modernist, where it just has to have this sort of brutal feel to it. Like it has to be kind of either like totally out there and wild, or totally practical and like looks like the Soviet, like an
Right.
abandoned Soviet building. And like that's kind of the two like far ends that I think people look to when they think of modern art or modern architecture. But there are new things that would be considered then modern, that are built more traditionally, or at least building on tradition in a new way that you can still innovate. I mean, all of these old buildings were at one point innovative as well.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And we'll touch on that today.
Mhm.
But for me, it was interesting because when I first started at Montclair State, it was kind of like, well, I know better. I'm trained as an architect. Like we can do modern things and we can slice and dice and do these cool things. But the students are craving for this common element. So
Mhm.
because they are so specialized and they're all kind of like in their own like little worlds and their own little silos, the architecture brings this community. It creates the sense of community. It's almost like the city on a hill. It's like this idealized version of what the world can be. So
Mhm.
to be able to contribute to that over the last 15 to 20 years, both as a consultant and now as the university architect, to be able to contribute to that architectural thread through the campus has been really, really awesome.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that too. I know when I visited IU when I was looking at colleges, or Indiana University, I guess, because there might be other IUs out there that people think of. But when I visited there, they had all of these everywhere you went. It was a very cohesive thing. I mean, there were some that were newer buildings that obviously stood out and you could tell. But when you went to the older part of the campus, they were just all red brick buildings that had kind of this same look, very, I mean, traditional look. I mean, they were built 200 years ago, so built in that style. And then there's always, and the funny thing is, Purdue and IU each have, and Purdue's all built out of limestone, but they each have one building that's built out of the other's
Mm.
material. So like there's one brick building at Purdue, and there's one limestone building at IU that was original. And
Mm.
it's kind of the rivalry, so they have that, their distinct looks, but there's that little piece that they shared. I thought that was just a cool, like at the time, I mean, I took that tour like 8 years ago, and I still remember that little fact that they had, because yeah, it's just, I think that there's something that you can appreciate about that architecture and the history
Absolutely.
that comes with it.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And I think even with, most architects don't want to be pigeonholed into having to design traditional buildings. So, just before going live on this podcast, we spoke briefly about the executive order and probably being overturned. Again, it's like the 2% elite, saying, we're beyond this. We